Hi, I'm Emily Mancini, and today we're going to be talking about OneNote, a productivity and adoption powerhouse. I'm an architect at Simpraxis Consulting. I specialize in information architecture and user experience. And before joining Simpraxis, I was a Microsoft 365 platform owner and trainer. So a lot of the OneNote and Microsoft 365 adoption that we're talking about today is all coming from that as a use case. So today we'll first start talking about identifying a toehold, generating demand, and creating that impactful training so we can discuss the why and the how before we go into the what when we explore the specific features in OneNote that helped drive adoption. So when you're launching Microsoft 365, it's a whole suite of tools, and that can be really overwhelming to launch at once. So what you want to think about is identifying your toehold. Just like a climber going up a rock wall is looking for those little spots to accelerate and continue their climb. So when we're looking for a toehold, we're thinking of what tool works best for our organization. It's a smaller solution to start, an easy win that's fast to implement and delivers high value. At this company, it was about 100 people. It had that scrappy startup feel, and they previously relied on the public network drive for sharing content and emailing. We just launched at the time. It was called Office 365, and no one was really using it. So thinking globally about Microsoft 365 as a solution, but acting locally on a smaller toehold, what would be an easy win? What's some kind of challenge at the organization right now that I can help implement? And one of the largest disconnects was how people were taking their meeting notes. Meetings ruled this organization. There's department meetings, team meetings, cross-functional meetings, committees, one-on-ones, meetings back to back. So there's tons of data that is being shared around in emails and on the file share. And it was pretty inconsistent how people were taking these meeting notes. Some were in Word files shared to the network's drive. Some were notes via email. And some people took paper notes and maybe those never got shared. So what Microsoft 365 solution could potentially help with these meeting notes and make them a little bit more standardized? And that's where we identified OneNote. So why OneNote though? Sure, it's a cloud notebook. Cloud notebooks can be really helpful, but for this organization, it was really specific about scalability and productivity. OneNote is easy to use. There's no IT assistance to set up. People could have independent sharing access internally and externally when saving it to their OneDrive. And for a small, quick-growing organization, there is a lot of tribal knowledge. So capturing that tribal knowledge on a page is a lot better start than not having it at all. Because of this quickly growing organization, people are changing roles all the time. So having a powerful search and reorganization structure helped support how fast this organization was moving. And in the end, we could use it to better help drive some of our SharePoint adoption. And some people started using OneNote so much that they actually started creating pages and tables for document repositories, which helped lead into that conversation of how you could actually better save documents to SharePoint and OneDrive and these other places. So one thing that your toehold is going to help you do, whatever solution it is, it's just an introduction to one solution, one feature that can help support what the organization needs right then. But you can use that toehold to help start generating demand into the other tools given their integration in Office 365. Since Microsoft 365 is this whole suite of tools, based on productivity improvements for employees, you're just getting them started in one before introducing them to the rest. So when you're introducing these toehold solutions, generate that demand by focusing on which tools in Microsoft 365 are best for your organization, not just giving them all at once. The integration of these tools in Microsoft 365 and across the different applications, and focus that training on productivity, because it's not just about, there's tons of apps and tools we get advertisements for all the time that are going to help change our day, but they're not really telling us how. So really focusing on how OneNote is going to change your day is important. So now that I'm convinced OneNote is really great option, I need to figure out what matters to my audience. What kind of productivity can I help my audience with? My first step was to learn all of the features to OneNote and then reduce it down to 1 hour or less for what matters to my audience. A 1 hour training is still quite a bit of content, so I definitely don't recommend going above that. Some organizations do well with having little bite-sized trainings. So you could have 5-minute videos. Maybe you have multiple half-hour trainings focused on different areas. Just make sure that you are focusing that conversation on why this tool specifically works for this organization. And the biggest part of this conversation was everyone had notebooks. We had free notebooks in the cabinets. So why is OneNote better than paper? For starters, it's cloud-based. You can have multiple notebooks broken out into sections and pages for incredible organization. And since it's in the cloud, I can access it from anywhere. For this organization, they were really used to accessing all of their content through the VPN. So here was an option to access content on your phone, from home, from an iPad if you're traveling, or on a plane. So freeing up that access was really important. It also gave everybody the opportunity to collaborate and share. If I'm taking notes in my paper notebook, I can't easily share that with a team member or vendor until I take those notes again by typing it up and then sharing them out. If I just take them once, then I can easily send them out to the team. And even better, maybe that team has access to the notebook. They can add in some of the things that I missed from those meeting notes. That really improves the whole outcome of our team meeting notes by having all of that feedback together. It also gave the organization the ability to flag some to-do items in context. So sometimes you take a quick short note like call Sandra, and then you add it to your to-do page, and then a week goes by. I have no idea why I need to call Sandra, but if it's in the page of that meeting note, I'll see, oh, it was a team meeting. Maybe we were talking about a speaker list and I need to call Sandra to see if she's available. That really helps you make your meeting notes more robust without relying on you taking better notes. Using OneNote is also a lot richer note-taking experience than a paper notebook. I can insert files, audio, video, hyperlinks. I have a lot of different options to make these notes be a little bit more impactful than a paper notebook that says check SharePoint later. I could just put that hyperlink right there into the page. And one of my favorite things is that really robust search, and it even lets you search text in images. It lets you search text embedded in files. That's incredible. So instead of flipping through my notebook trying to remember, did this happen before the meeting last Thursday or after, and having only one way to find things in that notebook, visibly scanning, then now I have a lot easier thing to search through and pull me to the different pages. So now that I'm confident about this solution, I have to generate some interest. So I got to get people in the door. This can be pretty challenging. And one thing I like to think about is what gets me in the door when I'm going somewhere and trying something new. So often when I'm traveling with my husband, I really like to find restaurants, some cool hole-in-the-wall place, and inevitably there's something special about them, and there is a line around the block. So what is it about this food place that we're going to try that's so special and different? What piqued my curiosity? And that's what you want to really focus on when you're trying to sell this training. Of course, leading with all of the productivity, the what's in it for them, super important. Sometimes people need a little bit more than that. Sometimes people might need to be coaxed into a training with something like atypical treats. And for this organization, that's something that worked really well. You know, at one of our trainings, we offered cupcakes and Prosecco on a Friday for the OneNote training. And yes, the conversation all week was about cupcakes and Prosecco, But at the end of the day, my goal was to get them in the room. And once they were in the room, the training spoke for itself. So if I had to use a little bit of our budget to drive that incentive even more, fine. But in a COVID world, I understand that that's a little bit more challenging. We have to focus on some virtual rewards. So maybe you're launching all of Microsoft 365 and this is just a part of your training. Maybe it's a gift card, a virtual gift card when all these training sessions are complete. Maybe you have a limited budget. It could be email callouts, company newsletter case studies of how this team started taking their OneNote notes and how much it impacted their group and their business productivity. It could be a list of OneNote champions on your SharePoint site. One of the best things about using these email case studies and callouts and features are that it's not just celebrating that person's extra effort for going above and beyond, but it's also an opportunity, again, to repeat scenarios where this training and this information and this content is really helpful. So again, we're focusing on getting them in the room and then really selling them during the training. So another option is to locate some of these trainings in public places. So once we're all in offices again together, maybe you're hosting the training in the kitchen during lunch hour so people can be overhearing it, putting them in these public spaces like a larger conference room with the door open during a time where that makes sense and it's not disruptive to the organization. People can come in and out and catch little blips. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. And I didn't believe that for a really long time. But if you put it in the context of 15 minutes of OneNote training is better than 0. And if those 15 minutes teach something to someone that helps them during their day, they're going to come back for more. So just try and get those little bits out there where you can. Some of the challenges of getting them in the room won't just be something like their interest, and you won't have to focus on these additional cells from the aside from the productivity. Maybe there's challenges of getting them in the room, like time constraints. People can be incredibly busy in their day-to-day. So just remember that they're giving up a whole hour of their day to get work done. They might already be triple booked. So to ask them to also go to a training can be really overwhelming. So think about your audience and how heavily this hour impacts their goals. Sometimes people's goals are actually impacted over what they can get done in these hours, like a lead generation team in marketing. Maybe that week they're focused on all of these sales calls and their bonuses based off of how many calls they get done. If your training has them get 10 calls less, then think about different ways you can focus on talking about your training, supporting them getting more calls done later. If you're trying to save people's time with OneNote, yes, you're giving up an hour with the intent to save many hours later, and make sure that's really crucial in your messaging. It's a bit like a NASCAR race. You're not going to win the race with the same set of tires. You have to pull over to the pit stop crew and have new tires put on the car for better traction. So make sure that that stop is worth it and you make the most of that time. So focusing that training on productivity and scenarios that are going to help people save time later makes that really crucial pit stop for them. So now we've talked about some of the incentives and what we need to do we have to figure out what to communicate to the business for this training. So when we send out this first email, pick your top cells in layman's terms. Again, you're pairing those top cells with why this solution is the toehold for your organization. So we already said OneNote is for productivity and scalability. And then put it into layman's terms. You want to make it be familiar and easy to understand. So the email that we sent out, again, called out, spend 1 hour learning how to save many hours. We're acknowledging, yes, you're taking an hour out of your day, but it's going to help you do everything faster later. One of our top things we wanted to call out was integration. So this company was going through what we called IT whiplash, where we were launching so many different things at the same time, and there were so many training sessions. It was just OneNote, another application I have to learn. Well, what if OneNote is actually something that just supports what you're already doing? You're already in Outlook working on your emails. A lot of people were using Outlook tasks to track what they were doing, and you're definitely in Outlook for the calendar and events. So what if OneNote can help make everything you do in Outlook even stronger? We talked about organization. This was a quick growing organization. People were shifting, things were moving quickly. They needed to be able to restructure a lot of this material that they were typing up. It could be tribal knowledge. It could be really informal business processes that they just wanted to get onto a page as you're developing them. They're not formalized yet enough to become standard operating procedures or work instructions. You're a small company of 20, 30 people. You don't have that maturity yet, but having some notes and some instructions in a OneNote notebook could be incredibly powerful. And for an organization that's working towards that maturity, this is a great frictionless way to start. So call out how easy it is to create these structures and then again, change them. You're not locked into it, and you don't need IT to help you restructure it. The last one that we talked about was accessing that notebook from virtually anywhere. Again, this group, it was used to VPN. So you had to have your work laptop and you had to have Wi-Fi to be able to get that content. Well, what if in this new world, you could open up your phone on the train on the way to work to prep to a meeting, or you're about to fall asleep and you had a really important thought for the meeting tomorrow for this pitch you had, jot that down and you know it's going to be there when you open up your laptop later to get prepped for that meeting. One thing we didn't do in this was mention the cloud. It terrified a lot of people, and I'd rather sell them on the features that I know are going to support them and have that challenging conversation in person. You know, I'm not saying sweep things under the rug or use any smoke or mirrors and be inauthentic. I am saying focus your message on the top things people need and keep it short. So we do call out you can access this notebook from virtually anywhere. That implies that it's going to be the cloud. And that was absolutely the first topic that we talked about in the training. Yes, OneNote is cloud-based, but it automatically saves everything for you. You never have to hit a save button. You don't have to be connected to Wi-Fi for it to save. If you're not connected to Wi-Fi and you're saving notes, that will get synced to the cloud automatically the next time you are connected to Wi-Fi. So even though it is all saved in the cloud, it's also accessible on your desktop. And that was a lot easier to discuss and demo in person than put into an email. So we talked about identifying our toehold, in this case it's OneNote, to help with productivity and scalability of meeting notes across the organization. We talked about generating that demand, so focusing your cells in layman's terms on what the organization needs help doing better. We talked about maybe some of those incentives that you want to add to the training, some of those case studies or treats to get them in the room, because that's the most important part, is getting them to show up. And now that you're getting them to show up in this training, how do I make this engaging so it's worth their time and I'm delivering on my promise of I'm having you spend 1 hour saving many hours later? So in this training, again, focus on how this tool helps them, not the tool itself. You'll want to use scenarios that they're familiar with, where this solution can be used, and put it into context. So talk about in a one-on-one with your manager when you're taking notes for action items, or when you're in a cross-functional meeting, here's ways you can email out that page when you don't have a shared notebook. If I'm going to be making some claims of what I'm going to be doing for productivity and all this time I'm going to be saving, include some data to support it. So if I'm saying taking all of these notes right into this shared notebook saves 5 minutes daily, maybe I did a little time recording of the old process, opening up a Word document, putting in the meeting title, putting in the attendees, saving that Word document, attaching it to that Outlook invite afterwards and emailing it out to everybody, compared to using OneNote all the time to start those meetings. Make sure your presentation's authentic and you're acknowledging any challenges if there are, whether it be with the application or business processes at your organization. And make sure that you're providing long-term support, custom training decks, office hours, hyperlinks to videos in your email after the training, answering any questions that you weren't able to cover. What we just talked about were the 6 rules for persuasive storytelling by the Nielsen Norman Group, who is the global leader in user research. And the reason why I recommend using this persuasive storytelling model is because it helps them envision the solution in their lives and creates a stronger mental model. So we talked about sending that email pitch. So adapt your vocabulary to match your audience. That's putting it into those layman's terms. What are managers looking for? What are individual contributors looking for? What about senior leadership? Put it into the vocabulary that they're already using. We're appealing to the needs of our audience. In this organization, they needed flexibility to grow and scale. So we're talking about how to structure these notebooks differently and how easy that is to change. We're backing up our points with real data. So that's where we're saying, okay, if I'm time saving, let me do that little stopwatch experiment of doing it the old way versus doing it with OneNote and doing a little calculation of how much time I saved that week. We're focusing on this entire omni-channel experience. So if you've never heard the term omni-channel experience before, it's this idea that you can interact with one application on different devices. So, and how it's going to be switching between them. So I'm in a meeting with my manager taking notes in our one-on-one for action items. And then maybe it's the next week and I'm on the train and I'm on my phone, and what it's going to be like being able to pull up that same OneNote notebook on my phone and dive right into that content from my last meeting with my manager to make sure, okay, yes, I did get all those action items done. I'm ready for this meeting today. So consider the technology and the scenarios that they're using the technology in. Pairing your story with an artifact, this could be done a couple different ways. One way I do it during the training is I give a 1-pager of the top OneNote actions for productivity and kind of call that out. It could also be when you're following up with that summary from the training where you're adding links to those videos, links to those training decks, links to Microsoft, any of that additional supporting information that's going to help them long term. It's going to help them past this firework of a training where you lit up the sky with how this could be possible, and you don't want it to just then fall and have them forget about it. You want them to be able to continue lighting up those fireworks of excitement and change on their own with this long-term training content. And in these trainings, inevitably, people are going to push some of the limits of what you know about SharePoint, or maybe scenarios that you considered. Always be transparent in your trainings and share, I haven't considered that, or let me double check on that, and follow up with those answers in your emails. You're establishing a relationship. This is your toehold again. So you're using OneNote to begin a trusted relationship with the organization that you're going to introduce tools that are going to help them get their work done better and faster. And being authentic and transparent in your training with your knowledge and the limitations is going to help drive that for the rest of your Microsoft 365 implementation. And it's really important that even though you're the presenter of this technology in the training, every teacher is always a student of who's in the room. You're going to have different perspectives and all those different scenarios you may not have considered. This is your opportunity to build a really active rapport with your training attendees. So that way they will come to you in the future with, hey, I'm having this issue in my group and I'm not sure how to solve it. And then you have this whole suite of M365 tools that you can offer to them. It might be Stream, it might be SharePoint, who knows? But the point is you've built this bridge for them to come talk to you and have these conversations. So together you're creating this ecosystem and this environment to work together. The other benefit of this is when people come to your training, if one person loves it, they're going to share it with the rest of the organization. They're going to share it with their team. Because if I love OneNote for my personal notes, I'm definitely going to want my team to start doing it that way because I see how much easier it is and how easy it is to access. And then I can access my personal notes and my team notes from one notebook. So that's one thing that's really positive about this customer journey is they become your influencers and champions. Sometimes, though, the customer journey doesn't go that way. So before we jump into these actual tips and tricks of productivity, let's talk about maybe some of the challenging customer journeys you should be aware of as you're setting up all these different steps to generate that demand and have that engaging training. So what we're looking at here is the OneNote training customer journey map. So up at the top, you'll see we're calling it out. And then in the middle, we have our baseline. So this is neutral. At the bottom, for each pillar, we have a different touch point. And what we want is all of our touch points to be above the baseline. That means we have an incredibly happy customer. But sometimes things go below the baseline and we have the opportunity to bring them above. So let's talk through a real scenario where first, you have figured out you want it to be OneNote, you've figured out how it's going to be impactful for productivity, you sent out that layman's terms email with those incentives. Now someone's actually receiving that email for the training. Came into their inbox, it was so thoughtful, so targeted, they're feeling pretty happy about it because they're thinking, wow, a training that is very relevant to a challenge that I'm having right now in the organization. Awesome. Well, now I need to find that link in this email to register for the training. Cool, you had an awesome formatted email. It was clear there was a training available at a time that they wanted to join. They clicked it though, and they got a 404 error. Bummer, your hyperlink was broken that you added. That's kind of frustrating. Now, this customer, your end user, and your colleague at your organization needs to navigate to another application. They need to open a browser and navigate to the training site. Feeling a little frustrated. Now I'm taking a little bit more time out of my day to do this thing that I thought was going to be awesome and easy and save me time. Even though it's costing me a couple seconds, it's still a pain. So my baseline's going a little bit lower. I was able to easily register for the training, so fine. I'm a little bit happier because I'm signed up, but I'm still annoyed. And at this point, right now, someone's navigating to join this in-person training or this virtual training, and they're not happy. We all know that can be a little bit frustrating to try and sell something to someone who doesn't want to be there, isn't interested, is frustrated, or distracted. So just realize, even though they were able to come to that training pretty easily, they're starting below that baseline. Fortunately, this training was stellar because we followed all those steps for 6 steps of persuasive storytelling. It was so in context for them. They're leaving the training feeling like they have some great stuff that they can do. And then you followed up to their questions and gave them that training content so they feel really empowered. In this scenario, yes, we ended up above the baseline, but I just want to call it out because sometimes trainings and implementations don't work out and it has nothing to do with your application. It could be your communication or the context at your business around it. So just really think hard about all the different touch points you have in relation to this application and realize it's not just the tool itself. Think about Apple and their unboxing experience. So that thoughtfulness really preps me to be excited when I turn on my new device. It's this perfect white little box that easily lifts off. And there's my gorgeous new iPhone at the top, right? And then when I take that out, the next thing I want is inevitably the manual. And that's the next thing there right below. So thinking of your customers' needs and their different steps and really curating that experience of that customer journey will make a really big impact in your training as well. So now that we talked about identifying the toehold, which tool works, generating that demand, having that impactful training, let's dive into my absolute favorite part, which is those actual tips and tricks in the training that is going to help them. So let's start first by talking about meeting notes. And again, I'm not discussing every feature right now or in the training. Right now, we're just focusing on my top productivity tips. So I'm skipping over a lot of the basic OneNote information. I do have a lot of that linked in the resource slide. So if you need to know basic stuff like setting up your notebook, differences between notebook sections and pages, that is all crucial. You should keep that as a quick intro in your trainings, but we're not going to be going over it now. We're going to dive right into page templates. So for page templates, One of my favorite things is this idea. In a group meeting, you probably have a standard structure. Maybe each week you list out the topics, the presenters, the amount of time they're going to take, the different action items people need to complete, and the decisions that were made in the meeting. It's really common in OneNote. Maybe you just make it a page. The next week you copy that page, you delete everything out of the page. So now you have a fresh page to start writing in. A lot of people do that even if you're not in OneNote. Maybe it's Word documents. You open up last week's meeting, you delete out all the notes from the meeting, and then you start fresh. That takes a couple of different seconds, right? And if you're coming into the meeting late, or even if you're coming on time, anywhere that we can shave seconds off in different steps of the process, you'll notice by the end of this half hour where we're talking about these tips and tricks, we've shaved off seconds in every step. Those seconds become minutes in your day. Those minutes become hours in your week. Those hours in your week become entire work weeks in your year if you really start to calculate it out. So we're acting really small, right? We're thinking locally, what can I make better? What tiny thing can I change for a large scale, better process? So let's make a page template so you don't have to copy that page and clear things out. So from the Home tab, we are going to go to Insert and then Page Templates and Page Templates again. At the bottom of that tab, we have Save Current Page as Template. So now I can give it a template name, and I can even set it as the default for new pages in this current section. I'm going to title this page just to show you what it looks like. So here's my first page, and then we're going to go Add a Page, and you'll see it's that blank template, and I can dive right into my next meeting right away. Awesome. Instantaneous. The next step I can do is, great, well, this meeting inevitably came from an Outlook event. Why don't I embed all those Outlook event meeting details right into my meeting? My page title is blank, so it's going to drop that right in. It's going to pull over all the information from the meeting attendees and that invitation message. So under Home, I can click Meeting Details. In this example, I'm going to do today, but you can choose meetings from other days. So you can even do meetings in advance to prep and take some notes. So we'll click Meeting Details, and we're going to click this Master Planning. So you'll see it dropped in the title. I can click the invitation message to expand and see the details of the agenda, and I can see the participants right there below. What I really love about looking at these participants as well is you can see right here, Derek accepted in Outlook. So often you find yourself being the meeting presenter and the meeting note taker at the same time. So you already have your PowerPoint or whatever document you're presenting. Now you have your OneNote where you're taking notes in. You don't even need to add in Outlook to that mix of applications you have open on your desktop, because you can see all of that Outlook information right here in OneNote. You don't need to open it at all. The other thing that I like down here about the participants is right here, my name and Derek's name. These are people cards. So just like in SharePoint and Teams and elsewhere, you can hover on this person's name to see all of that other information about them in your organization. So who they report to can be really helpful if you have a large organization, you're working cross-functionally, or you're new to this organization. You can see some of the files that you both have in common that you have access to or that you've shared previously. It really helps put people into context. So now that we have our page template, we dropped in this actual meeting information. Another thing I really like to do is actually link that meeting content you're discussing right into the notebook. We mentioned that the OneNote notebooks are so much more powerful than a paper notebook because you can embed all of this content. So if you're reviewing a document that's on your OneDrive or a SharePoint site or an external site, insert that hyperlink right into the page. You can use Control K as you're typing to pop up that modal dialog box to paste in that link. And this is really helpful. So whether it be for yourself later as an action item or for people who missed that meeting, you're removing all of the friction for them to jump right into their action items from these meeting notes by clicking that link. Someone can open this page, click the link, read that speaker list. But in the old days of a paper notebook, they would have had to go see it said it was in a SharePoint site, open a browser, navigate to that SharePoint site and find it in the document library. Again, this is another opportunity where you're shaving off more seconds and removing more friction between someone getting their job done. So this is how I'm delivering on spend 1 hour learning how to save many hours, is all these different areas where I can make your job a little bit faster and a little bit easier. So now we are taking notes in this meeting, and let's say you're in a laptop, you have some limited real estate. You can free up your screen by docking it to desktop. So what you can do is you can go to the View tab and then dock to desktop, and you'll see it locks it over to the right side of the screen, and I can open up my PowerPoint full screen. Up here at the top, we have this gray bar. You can actually drag that to move your notebook around the screen, and you can use these arrows on the top right to go back to full screen mode. What I really like about Dock to Desktop is while I'm presenting, I have it on the right so I can quickly jot these notes and it's not taking up too much space while I present my content. Often, as an architect, I'm also building sites. So it works really well for my action items later. We might be looking at something and I'm taking a vertical list of things that I need to do. Well, when it comes time to build, I'm going to open up a browser on the left side and dock my OneNote notebook to desktop again, and I can see those different steps that I have to complete. Also consider Dock to Desktop. Maybe someone emailed you a list of action items and you don't have multiple screens. Put that list of action items into your OneNote notebook, dock it to desktop, slide right here, whatever size you want. And when you make your other application full screen, it will automatically fit to that leftover space you have available. What's even cooler about Dock to Desktop is it will automatically link your notes if you're using Internet Explorer, Word, PowerPoint, and even some other OneNote pages. So let's take a look at that. So here I'm typing, and because I have that PowerPoint open, you'll see I'm getting this PowerPoint icon right here. And when I hover on it, it's calling out which document it is. So at a later date, when I open this OneNote notebook, I can click that icon and it will open up that document in the location where it was when I took that note. Again, if you move that document location, that will break the link. So try to make nice structures with your OneDrive and SharePoint, of course. So now at the end of this meeting, right, we saved some time with setting up the meeting and taking the notes. Now I want to save some time with emailing it out. The old process was save my Word document, add it to the public drive, open up Outlook, open up that event, hit reply all, and then type in a message and attach these notes from that public drive. Instead, what we can do right here is email Paige. So when we select to email Paige, what it's going to do is open up an Outlook message. This note group doesn't have access to the notes, so I deleted out the hyperlink. And then you'll see here's all of that information that was on my page, and I have the opportunity to edit anything I want. I deleted out that link very quickly at the top because if you're using email Paige to send out your notes to a group of people who don't and probably shouldn't have access to your notebook, you want to remove that link because human nature is, oh, I see a link, let me click it. They're inevitably going to get that permission error, and then they may not go back to your Outlook message to scroll down and actually see those notes in context. They might just hit reply and say, hey, I don't have access. And then you have to reply back and say, oh, you do, just scroll down. And we all want to avoid those awkward conversations and also remove that friction from your colleague of setting up expectations clearly that they don't have access to this notebook, but here are these notes that I want to share. You also, right here, we have this list of participants. In this example, I'm the organizer and Derek accepted. Someone might have declined and they'll still show up in the to line. That's fantastic because now they didn't attend this meeting and here they are getting these notes automatically. Again, you can change any of this text as well. So maybe you want to add in some additional information. I do recommend using email page in the beginning phases of your OneNote implementations with team as you're driving that adoption. If they're used to getting those emailed notes, that could be a good way to start for the first month or so. But what I like even better is adding the link to your OneNote notebook into your Outlook event series. And this is something you can work towards with your team. So if your old process was one person emails out and says, hey, what's everybody's agenda topics? And then they gather them and put them into a Word document. Then in that meeting, you talk about that Word document and then it gets sent out after. That's a lot of administrative time on that one person. What you can do instead is, because everyone can read write into this notebook, you can add the link to the Team OneNote notebook into the Outlook event series. Set the expectation with the team. Everyone can go in and add their own agenda items. Everyone can click that link after and look at the notes to review their notes and make any adjustments or corrections. So let's look at how to do that. We'll open up that Outlook event and you'll see it's called Meeting Notes up here with the OneNote icon. And then I selected Share Notes with the meeting. And here I'm navigating to which section or page I want to add. And now we have that hyperlink in our Meeting Notes series. You do need to be the event owner to be able to embed this link into the series. So do pay attention to that, and maybe you have to work with your meeting event series owner to get that added. And you will notice that across Outlook, it just calls it Meeting Notes and it uses the icon. I really wish that Microsoft called out that it was OneNote to help bridge that gap, but now that you know this trick, you can maybe help educate your organization on that difference as well. At this point, one of the top questions I get is, can I lock the page for editing? After this meeting has occurred? Unfortunately, the answer is no. You're either going to give everybody read-write access to the whole notebook, or you're going to give them read access. The good news is your notebooks do have page versioning, and it does show who edited what. So if you have any concerns in your organization, like someone deleted the action items, don't worry. You can go in to your page version history. You can see who deleted those items and their names and the date. So you do have that there. Of course, I would recommend that you want to build accountability and trust in your teams so that this isn't an item of concern. So last but not least, we have all these notebooks. You have all of these teams. Let's talk about that search a little bit. I mentioned that you can search all different notebooks. So you can type there in text to search across all notebooks or just one. It will search the text and images. It will search embedded files. It will search audio if you enable it in the options. So under options, you go to audio and video and check enable to search. So you can find all of this information everywhere. You'll see at the bottom of this slide, I have linked Getting Started with OneNote that talks a lot more about these search capabilities and other tips and tricks. So I recommend checking that out. So when you're working with these notebooks with your teams, this is all great. You might have some cross-functional areas. You might have some confidential information. So you might want to protect some information from the group. Whatever you do, please do not password protect. Password Protect doesn't have any recovery options for you, for your IT department or Microsoft support. So if you're password protecting it, it's probably important. So losing your password and not being able to recover any of that information is pretty detrimental. So that's one big reason not to do it. Another reason not to do it is because if it is so important that other people don't see it, it's a little bit like don't give someone access to a filing cabinet if you don't want them to pick that lock, right? You don't even want them to get close to that lock. There's nothing in OneNote that will kind of kick someone out after a number of failed attempts, so they'll have an inevitable amount of time. A third reason is it's super annoying when you, each time you open up your OneNote and that section, you have to type in the password. And then if you minimize that notebook and open it a minute later, you have to type it again. This whole training is supposed to be about productivity and saving seconds. I guarantee you, password protecting your sections will not save you time. Instead, we recommend using notebook level permissions. And since we're using OneNote as this toehold and this introduction to generate demand and interest in Microsoft 365, I highly recommend using some of these notebooks connected to your Microsoft 365 groups, the ones that are automatically created in your SharePoint team sites. So if Microsoft 365 groups are a new thing to you, I highly recommend checking out this amazing graphic by Matt Wade on jump to365.com. You'll see I have this link at the bottom. But essentially at the top, what we see is all the different areas that Microsoft 365 groups can be created and then what comes with them. And you will notice through all of these is OneNote. So if you have a SharePoint team site, great news, you already have a OneNote notebook. And what that means is you have the same set of permissions as well, because that Microsoft 365 group is adding those permissions to everything that is connected here. So again, we're talking about productivity and shaving seconds off your day. You have a new team member, they have access to the site. Great news. You don't also have to now go navigate and find the OneNote notebook and give them access there. It all happens together at once. So now that we talked about how to use OneNote to help your meeting notes and save time and increase productivity with teams, let's talk about personal notes. And this is one of my favorite areas because I absolutely live in OneNote. I use it not only for work, but I also use it for my personal life. I use it for travel. I use it for cooking and recipes. I use it to make a home notebook for what that air filter is that I need, or that paint color, because I inevitably end up at Home Depot or another store without that information. And if you write it on a paper list and you leave it at the house, what a bummer. Again, this is all about productivity, and productivity at home also helps reduce stress when you are focusing on productivity at work as well. So don't be afraid to start using OneNote in your personal life and set up a Microsoft personal account for free. So one of my first items is talking about your action item tracking. So again, a lot of people already use Outlook tasks. So framing OneNote and how it supports something they're already doing but can help them do it better is really crucial to highlight. What's nice about the Outlook task integration is if you're just creating a task standalone in Outlook, that's fine. In a lot of cases, it might make sense because it might be a flagged email and all the context is there. Sometimes, though, it might be from a meeting and you're going into your Outlook and you're manually making it separately, and then it's out of that context. Just like we talked about my example earlier in my notebook, call Sandra. I don't know what I'm calling Sandra about, but if it's in the context of my team meeting about this upcoming speaker list, that helps jog my memory. Oh yeah, that little note that I kept was about contacting Sandra to see if she'd be available to talk. So what you can actually do is when you're taking these meeting notes, you can go to Outlook tasks and you can go to something that you typed and tag it with that Outlook task timing. You can do custom or one of these little preset values, and then it's available in your Outlook task view and also within your OneNote notebook, which I'll show you in the next slide in the tag summary. So here you can see, just for that example, right down here, we have in this tag summary, the Outlook task. You'll also notice I have a bunch of different icons, and this is from to-do tags. And to-do tags are my absolute favorite because I tend to work not off of a time basis, which is what Outlook tasks provides you, but with a work flow basis. So I like to group my work into categories. So I might be working on, as an external consultant, client-based work. That's an easy way to break it out. But sometimes it might be project-based. So one of the things that I help work on in Simpraxis is our website. So I will get a bunch of different action items. I will get some action items from our team meetings. Maybe something will come up in our biweekly Ask Simpraxis webinars where people can come and ask us a bunch of different questions, and we need to follow up and post those to the website. So I like to make buckets for my work. And then what I do is I put blocks on my calendar for, okay, on Friday for an hour, I'm working on the website, and all those little items that I have to do, I'm going to do all at once, because reducing my context switching helps me get more done. There's a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen, which I highly, highly recommend. It's great. It's very short, easy to scan. And he talks about this idea of workflow zen. So this idea that when you have everything set out in front of you and prepared, and you're just checking stuff off your list, getting stuff done, how awesome that feels. You feel so productive. It's frictionless. You're zooming through your day. To set up your workflow zen, each time you have an action item, you want to put it into that context of your work block later. And if you do it the moment that you get it, you're not going to spend time later scanning all of those flagged emails in your inbox or your to-do list, figuring out what's most important, what can I get done together, what can I group. Group it that first time. So you spend 1 second doing it then versus 20 seconds each time you review it and re-look over that to-do list. So here again, you can see under to-do tags, you can make custom tags. And then when you go to your find tags to see your tag summary, you'll see them grouped. So all the books I want to read, all the actions I need to do in the website. And again, also a nice way, even if you're just an Outlook task user, to see all your Outlook tasks grouped together from OneNote. Again, you don't have to open another application and go to Outlook and see that information. What about maybe something that is emailed to me? Sometimes you get something emailed to you with all of the context of what you need to do. And if you're a to-do tag user, you can add it to your OneNote. So what you can do right up here, you'll see again that pesky little OneNote icon and just calling it, meeting notes. You can select that and send to OneNote, and then navigate to your different notebook structures, expand and pick the exact different page and area you want to get it in. So it's an easy way to save walkthroughs or instructions that someone sent you to do. So spending that extra second now to prepare for yourself for work later so you can just dive in. What I also love then, again, someone sent you steps to do, cool. Use Doc to Desktop while you open up that other application and you can see that walkthrough as you go through all the work you need to do. All right, let's take a peek at embed files. So we talked a little bit about hyperlink and using Control K. That's awesome for a living, breathing document that's in OneNote or in SharePoint. Sometimes you can embed the file itself as a file printout, and it actually adds each document here as a JPEG. This can be really great for content that is not changing frequently, or you want to mark up, or you want to take notes next to. I do this when I go to conferences and they share the slide decks. I'll embed the whole slide deck into my OneNote, and then I take my notes to the right. So I'm not spending my time or attention already recreating something that exists. I'm adding my additional thoughts and context to the right. You also have this option up here to draw, and you don't need a touch device to do that. You can just use your mouse. So I can circle something or cross something out and make some edits. You can even right click on these images and copy text from the picture. So if you just have a PDF from a conference and you want to shorten your note-taking time to share, that is something that you can do. So I don't recommend embedding live documents in SharePoint and OneNote. Just as a reminder, you do want to use hyperlinks for that because you don't want to create a moment in time for something that is constantly changing. And in this example, I just uploaded the OneNote 2016 tips and tricks right here into the notebook. So while the team's learning, they can actually dive into this content right here. And I have that linked on the bottom. I highly recommend it. So all of the things that I'm skipping right now, creating notebooks, sections, pages, the fact that it auto saves and you never have to hit save, that can actually all be embedded right into your notebook. Again, to have that artifact frictionless and available for your team to get their work done. Another thing that you can do is record audio. So I mentioned that this is available via search if you enable it. You always want to check with your organization and anyone that you're recording for legal reasons to get approval first. But once you have that approval, what's really cool is just like that link to meeting notes where OneNote was able to identify what I had open full screen next to the notes that I was taking. There's also some little tips and tricks with this record audio where this note that I took, if I click that play button, it will play 3 seconds from before I started to type that note. So my little note is in the context of that recording, and I know exactly when I took that note, and it can help jog my memory again. Be careful though. Be aware of where your microphone is. So for example, if you're doing this in a large scale training, you're the back of the class, it's on a laptop, and you are a loud typer, and the trainers at the front of the room probably not going to record so well. So try and be careful and do some tests before you fully commit to it and rely on it. All right, last but not least, we saw in Outlook some of those little send to OneNote options, and you saw I had that option to navigate through my notebooks and sections and pages. There's a little checkbox that you can check and say, always send to this section. And that works for a lot of people if that's the only scenario you're ever going to use it. More often than not, though, the question I get is, it used to ask me where to send it, and now it doesn't. So to reset that, go to your OneNote options, send to OneNote, and you'll see you can control the Outlook items and the other content that gets sent to your OneNote. So you can pick. I personally like always ask since I'm working across so many different scenarios, but this is an opportunity to, again, shave those seconds off, increase your productivity by picking that one location if you're always using the same one. So I know that was a lot of information of how to do the training and then some of the things to include in your training. And hopefully this gave you some ideas on ways OneNote can help drive your Microsoft 365 adoption, capture that tribal knowledge by making it frictionless for teams to just drop information into these shared notebooks that everybody can see and add to, increase productivity for teams and individuals by shaving off these seconds for these repetitive tasks that everybody's completing throughout their day. And unfortunately, since this is just a video training, we don't have time for questions and answers, but I'm always available on Twitter at Mancini. Please feel free to tweet me with any of your OneNote thoughts, questions, scenarios, maybe even some things that you love that I haven't brought up that you think really helped your organization. I'm always happy to talk about OneNote, probably for too long. So feel free to reach out at any point. Again, that's at Mancini. And then as promised, here's our list of resources. So here at the top, for a while, OneNote 2016 wasn't being installed by default. So if that happened to you or your organization, here's a great link to install it. Here is some information for getting started with OneNote. I skipped over a lot of that basic content. So this is a great place to go if you are completely unfamiliar with OneNote. Next, below that, we have that tips and tricks that I embedded. I recommend embed that into a team notebook so they have that help support right there when they're starting to use it. And then here's some different overview of the differences between OneNote Windows app and OneNote 2016. I personally like OneNote 2016 desktop app more, and that's what you saw in this training today, but you can check this out to evaluate for yourself. Here's that link to that persuasive storytelling so you can learn a bit more about how to be a really impactful trainer. We had the link to Matt Wade's Everyday Guide to Office 365 groups and what comes with them. I have a link to a blog article about some meeting note organization and some additional videos like we were talking about today with some additional tricks. And last but not least, at the conferences, I always like to bring a I Support Women in STEM sticker, and I would love to offer this sticker to you for free. I would be more than happy to mail it to you if you put your mailing address into this Microsoft form. I totally understand that mailing addresses are sensitive and personal and confidential. I will delete it immediately after mailing you this. You will not be added to any mailing list. You will never get anything again from me unless you ask. But thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful journey with OneNote, and I look forward to talking with you on Twitter about it.